I gave her everything. My savings, my trust, my heart. She told me she loved me. She told me I was her future. And then one morning I woke up, and it was all gone. The money, the condo I never knew about, the man I never knew existed. I met Analiza on a Tuesday afternoon at the Seaside Mall in Cebu. I remember the exact day because it was my birthday, 67 years old, and I was spending it alone, buying a phone charger I didn't really need, just something to do, something to get me out of my condo. I'd been in the Philippines for 8 months by then, trying to convince myself I'd made the right decision leaving Manchester, trying to convince myself that peace was possible. But mostly I was just lonely, the kind of lonely that sits in your chest like a stone. I was standing at the electronics counter, holding this cheap charger, when she looked up at me. Analiza. I didn't know her name yet, but she smiled, not the polite smile you get from cashiers who are counting down the minutes to their break. A real one, warm, open, like she actually saw me. I hadn't felt that in years. "You're from England?" she asked, her voice soft, her eyes bright with genuine curiosity. I nodded, surprised she could tell. Most people assumed I was American. "Manchester," I said, my voice rusty from not using it much lately. She leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the counter, and her voice dropped to something more personal. "I've always wanted to visit England. The castles, the countryside, the rain, everything." I laughed, caught off guard. "The rain's not as romantic as you think. Trust me." She smiled wider, and it reached her eyes. "Maybe not, but I think I'd still like it. Something about the cold, the old buildings. It feels like history, you know?" There was something in the way she said it, like she wasn't just making polite conversation, like she actually cared. I paid for the charger, and just as I was about to leave, she did something I didn't expect. She grabbed my receipt and wrote something on the back, her number, just like that. No hesitation, no games. She slid it across the counter. "Call me if you want to talk more," she said, her voice gentle. "About England. Or anything." I stared at the number, my heart doing something I hadn't felt in a decade. "I'm Lester," I said. "Analiza," she replied. "I hope you call." I took that receipt and folded it carefully into my wallet. Walked out of that mall in a daze. I didn't plan to call. I told myself I was too old for this, that she was just being polite, that a beautiful 29-year-old woman couldn't possibly be interested in a 67-year-old retired engineer with gray hair and creaky knees. But that night, sitting alone in my condo with the TV on mute, I couldn't stop thinking about her smile, about the way she leaned in, about the way she said, "I hope you call." The silence in my place felt heavier than usual. I thought about my late wife, Margaret, about how she'd been gone for 10 years now, about how I'd promised myself I'd move on, find happiness again, but never really tried. I thought about my daughter back in Manchester, living her own life, barely calling, about my friends who'd slowly stopped inviting me out because I always said no, and I realized I'd been dead for 10 years too, just going through the motions, existing, not living. I pulled out that receipt and stared at Analiza's handwriting. Neat. Careful. I typed out a message on my phone. Deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Finally, I just wrote something simple. "Hi, it's the Englishman from the mall, Lester. Hope it's okay that I'm texting." I hit send before I could change my mind. Then I sat there, staring at my phone like a teenager, my heart pounding. 3 minutes later, it buzzed. "I was hoping you would. I'm Analiza, but you already know that. How was the rest of your day?" And just like that, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. We met for coffee 2 days later at a small cafe near the waterfront. I got there 30 minutes early, nervous like a teenager on a first date. I kept checking my phone, wondering if she'd actually show up, wondering if this was real or just some elaborate joke the universe was playing on a lonely old man. But then she walked in, and all those doubts evaporated. She was wearing a simple yellow dress that moved when she walked, and when she saw me, her whole face lit up. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Traffic was terrible. "You're not late," I said, even though she was 5 minutes early. "I just got here." She ordered a cappuccino. I ordered black coffee. We sat by the window overlooking the bay, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she leaned forward. "So tell me about Manchester. What's it like?" I started talking, and once I started, I couldn't stop. I told her about the rain that never ends, about the football culture, about my years working as an engineer, about the house I sold before coming here. She listened to every word, really listened. Not just waiting for her turn to talk, but actually engaged, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. And then, somehow, I found myself telling her about Margaret, about my late wife. She had cancer, I heard myself saying, staring down at my coffee. Ovarian. By the time they found it, it was everywhere. She fought for 2 years, but I trailed off. Analiza reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was warm, soft. "I'm so sorry, Lester," she said, and her voice carried weight. Real empathy. That must have been unbearable. I nodded, feeling that familiar knot in my throat. It was. Still is. Sometimes. You don't really get over it. You just learn to live around it. "Is that why you came here?" she asked gently. "To the Philippines?" "Partly. After she died, everything in Manchester felt heavy. The house, the memories. My daughter moved to London, got married, started her own life. My friends meant well, but they all had wives, families, routines. I was just the widower they felt obligated to invite to things. I needed a change, needed to be somewhere where I wasn't defined by my loss." She squeezed my hand. "And are you happy here?" I looked at her, at the genuine concern in her eyes. "I wasn't," I said honestly. "Until now." She smiled, and it wasn't flirtatious or calculated. It was just kind. "You deserve to be happy again, Lester. You really do." We talked for 3 more hours. The cafe staff started cleaning up around us, and we barely noticed. She told me about her life, about growing up in a small barangay outside Cebu, about her father, who died when she was 12, about her mother, who worked as a seamstress to keep the family afloat. "We didn't have much," she said, stirring her second cappuccino, "but we had each other. That's what my mother always said. As long as we have each other, we're rich." She talked about her dreams, about wanting to travel someday, about wanting to give her family a better life. She never asked me for anything, never hinted, just shared her story with the same openness I'd shared mine. When we finally left, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She hugged me goodbye. Not a polite hug, a real one, the kind where you actually feel the other person. "Can I see you again?" I asked, not wanting to let go. She pulled back just enough to look at me. "I'd really like that." That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, because I was excited. For the first time in 10 years, I was excited about tomorrow. Within 2 weeks, Analiza and I were inseparable. We saw each other every day, coffee in the mornings, lunch when she had breaks from work, dinners that stretched into late evenings. She showed me parts of Cebu I never would have found on my own. Not the tourist spots, but the real places. The local markets where women sold fresh fish and mangoes. The hidden beaches with water so clear you could see your toes. The small restaurants where the food was incredible and cost almost nothing. She made me feel alive again, like I wasn't just passing time anymore, like I was actually living. One afternoon, she asked if I wanted to meet her family. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's only been 2 weeks." She smiled. "In the Philippines, 2 weeks is long enough if you're serious, and I think you're serious." She was right. I was serious. More serious than I'd been about anything in years. We took a jeepney to her aunt's neighborhood. I'd never been on a jeepney before. Analiza laughed at how I had to duck my head getting in, at how I gripped the rail when the driver took corners at alarming speeds. "You'll get used to it," she said, her hand on my knee. The neighborhood was cramped. Narrow concrete streets lined with small houses, their walls painted in faded pastels. Chickens wandered freely. Kids played in the dirt with makeshift toys. Laundry hung between houses on sagging lines. It was a world away from my air-conditioned condo, but there was something about it, something real, something alive. Tita Baby's house was small but clean. Concrete walls, a tin roof, a tiny living room with plastic chairs and a TV that looked like it was from the 90s. She welcomed me with open arms, literally. "Ay, Analiza," she exclaimed in Cebuano, then switched to broken English. "He's so handsome, so tall." I felt my face flush. Analiza laughed. "Tita, stop embarrassing him." Tita Baby pulled me inside, sat me down in the best chair, and within minutes, my plate was piled high with lumpia, adobo, and rice. "Eat, eat," she insisted. "You're too skinny." I wasn't skinny, but I ate anyway. The food was delicious, homemade, full of flavor. Tita Baby kept talking, a mix of Cebuano and English, telling stories about Analiza as a child, about the family, about how proud she was that Analiza found such a good man. "She's a good girl," Tita Baby said, patting Analiza's hand. "Works so hard, sends money home, takes care of everyone. She deserves someone who will take care of her too." I looked at Analiza, who was smiling but also looked slightly embarrassed. "I'm trying my best," I said. Tita Baby beamed. After dinner, Analiza and I sat outside on a plastic bench, watching the neighborhood kids play. The air was warm and smelled like cooking fires and jasmine. "Your aunt is wonderful," I said. "She's a lot," Analiza admitted, "but she raised me after my father died. She's more like a mother than an aunt." "She loves you." "She does." Analiza leaned against me. "Thank you for coming here, for being okay with all of this. I know it's different from what you're used to." I put my arm around her. "Different isn't bad. This feels more real than anything I've experienced in years." She looked up at me. "You're different too, Lester. Different from other foreigners I've met." "How so?" "You don't look down on us. You don't act like you're better. You're just kind." I kissed the top of her head. "You make it easy." That night, I felt something I hadn't felt since Margaret. Wanted. Needed. Like I belonged somewhere. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to shift. It began small. A week later, we were having dinner when Analiza looked at her phone and sighed. Just a small sound, but I caught it. "What's wrong?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. Don't worry about it." "Analiza, tell me." She hesitated, then set down her fork. "It's my phone. It's been shutting off randomly. I think the battery's dying. I need it for work, but..." She trailed off, shrugging. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." I reached for my wallet immediately. "How much do you need?" She looked up, surprised. "No, Lester. I wasn't asking." "I know," I said. "But let me help. How much is a new phone?" "Maybe 5,000 or 6,000 pesos. But really, I can wait." I pulled out 5,000 and handed it to her. "Get a good one. Something reliable." Her eyes filled with tears. She stood up, came around the table, and hugged me tightly. "You're my hero," she whispered. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was what it meant to take care of someone, to be needed, to matter. A week later, it was the electric bill. Tita Baby's house. "I'm so sorry to ask," Analiza said, her voice small. "But Tita can't afford the bill this month. They're going to cut off her power. I would pay it myself, but I just got the phone, and..." "How much?" I asked. 3,000. I handed her the money without hesitation. She cried again, kissed me, told me I was the kindest man she'd ever met. Then it was medicine for Tita Baby's diabetes, then a leak in the roof that needed fixing, then her cousin's school fees. Each time, Analiza never directly asked. She just mentioned the problem, and I offered the solution. It felt good, noble, even, like I was making a real difference in their lives, like I mattered. One Saturday afternoon, we were at Tita Baby's house when she pulled me aside into the small kitchen. She looked nervous, wringing her hands. "Lester, can I talk to you?" "Of course." "The roof," she said in halting English. It's leaking bad. When it rains, water comes in everywhere. My bed gets wet, the TV, the clothes, everything. I need to fix it, but I don't have money. The man says maybe 10,000 pesos. She looked down at her feet. I'm sorry to ask. Analiza said, I shouldn't bother you, but I don't know what else to do. 10,000 pesos. About 150 pounds. Nothing to me, everything to her. Don't apologize, I said firmly. Let me take care of it. I pulled out my wallet and counted out the bills. Tita Baby's hands shook when she took the money. She started crying, actually crying, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she said, gripping my hand with both of hers. Thank you so much. Your family now, your family. Analiza came in and saw us, saw the money, saw her aunt crying. Lester, you didn't have to. I wanted to, I said firmly. She hugged me, and I felt her trembling slightly. No one has ever cared about my family like this, she said, her voice breaking. No one. That night, driving back to my condo, I felt proud, useful, like I was building something real, like I was the man I'd always wanted to be. But there was also something else, something I couldn't quite name. A small voice in the back of my mind asking, when does helping become something else? When does generosity become dependency? I pushed the thought away. I was taking care of the woman I loved and her family. That's what good men did. That's what I told myself. 3 months in, I asked Analiza to marry me. I didn't plan it. We were sitting on Malapascua Beach on a Sunday evening, watching the sun sink into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The sand was warm beneath us, the sound of waves gentle and rhythmic. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her hand in mine, and whispered something I'll never forget. I wish this moment could last forever. I turned to her. My heart was pounding. Then marry me. She froze, her head lifted slowly, her eyes wide, searching mine like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. What? Marry me, I said again, louder this time, more certain. I know it's fast. I know we're different. But I love you, Analiza. I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to wonder what if. I want you in my life. Every day. Forever. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She nodded, unable to speak at first. Then she threw her arms around me, her face buried in my neck. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Lester, yes. I held her as the sun disappeared below the horizon. I felt complete, whole, like all the broken pieces of me had finally been put back together. We got married 2 months later. A small ceremony at the city hall in Cebu, just the two of us, Tita Baby, and a couple of Analiza's cousins I'd met once or twice. I wore a white button-down shirt and khakis. Analiza wore a simple white dress that made her look like something out of a dream. I bought her a gold ring, simple but elegant, and when I slipped it on her finger, her hands were shaking. After the ceremony, I rented a nice restaurant near the waterfront for the reception. Nothing fancy, but nice. Clean tablecloths, good food. I paid for everything. The whole thing cost about 50,000 pesos. But I didn't care. This was my wedding. Our wedding. It was worth every centavo. My friends back in Manchester sent cautious messages when I told them, "Are you sure about this, mate? Just be careful, Lester." One of them, David, called me directly. "Lester, I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but you barely know this woman." "I know her well enough," I said, defensive. "Do you? Really?" "David, I appreciate your concern, but I'm happy. For the first time in a decade, I'm actually happy." There was a long pause. "All right, mate. I hope you're right. I really do." My daughter sent a 2-line email from London. "Dad, please be careful. I love you." I read it and felt a flicker of irritation. Why couldn't anyone just be happy for me? Why did everyone assume the worst? I ignored the doubts. I ignored the warnings. I was in love. I was married. I wasn't alone anymore. The wedding night? We stayed at a beachside resort in Moalboal. Nothing extravagant, just a clean room with a view of the ocean. Analiza fell asleep in my arms, her breathing soft and steady. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the waves outside, thinking about my first marriage to Margaret, how heavy it had felt sometimes, how complicated, the expectations, the routines, the unspoken resentments that built up over the years. This felt different, lighter, simpler, like a second chance at something I thought I'd lost forever. I kissed Analiza's forehead and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't hear me, but I meant it. The first crack appeared 3 weeks after the wedding. I woke up at 2 in the morning to the sound of buzzing. Analiza's phone, vibrating insistently on the nightstand. She grabbed it fast, too fast, like she'd been waiting for it. She slipped out of bed without a word. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. "Just my cousin," she said quickly, heading to the bathroom. "Family drama. Go back to sleep." I heard her voice through the door, low and urgent, speaking Cebuano. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, tense, secretive, worried. When she came back to bed 10 minutes later, I asked again, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she said, her back to me. "It's fine, just family stuff." But it wasn't fine. I could feel it. The way she lay there, rigid, not touching me. The way her breathing never quite settled into sleep. And it kept happening. Late night calls that she always took in the bathroom. Sudden errands in the middle of the day. "I need to help my aunt with something. My cousin needs me for an hour. I'll be back soon." She always came back, but she was different. Distant, like part of her was somewhere else. One evening, about a month after the wedding, we were watching TV when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen before she could grab it. The name flashed for just a second. Ronaldo. "Who's Ronaldo?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle. "An old friend. He's nobody." "Nobody?" "Yeah, just someone I used to know. He messages sometimes. It's nothing, Lester." "If it's nothing, why does he call at 2 in the morning?" Her face changed, hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No, I'm just asking, because if you don't trust me, maybe we have bigger problems." I felt my stomach drop. "I do trust you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "It's fine," she said, but her voice was cold. "Just forget it." I stayed quiet after that. Didn't bring up Ronaldo again. Didn't ask about the late night calls. I told myself I was being paranoid. That marriage required trust. That questioning her would only push her away. But the silence grew, and with it, the distance. A week later, I was looking for my car keys and found a receipt in Analiza's purse. A hotel in Mandaue. The date was from 3 days ago. A Tuesday. The day she said she was helping Tita baby with a doctor's appointment. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up when she came into the living room. She glanced at it, barely reacting. "Oh, that. My cousin's birthday party. A bunch of us got a room for the group. You know, somewhere to change and leave our stuff." "In Mandaue?" "Yeah. It was cheaper there." "Why?" I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. "No reason. Just curious." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry so much, Lester. Everything's fine." I nodded and put the receipt back. But that night, lying in bed next to her, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About Ronaldo. About the late night calls. About the distance that seemed to grow a little more each day. I told myself I was overthinking. That every marriage had rough patches. That love required faith. But deep down, something was shifting. Something I didn't want to name. Something that made my chest feel tight every time I looked at her. I met Malcolm and his girlfriend Cherry for dinner at a seafood place in La Hougue. Malcolm had reached out a few days earlier, said we should catch up. I almost said no. I wasn't in the mood for socializing, but Analiza encouraged me. "You need friends here," she said. "You can't just stay home all the time." So I went. Malcolm's been in the Philippines for 8 years. He's Australian, 64, practical, no nonsense. We'd met at an expat meetup a few months back and hit it off over beers and football talk. Cherry was Filipina, 38, confident and straightforward. She worked as a nurse at a private hospital in Cebu. They'd been together for 3 years. We ordered grilled squid, prawns, and rice. The restaurant overlooked the water, and the evening breeze was perfect. For the first half hour, we talked about nothing important: football, the weather, the traffic in Cebu. Then Malcolm leaned over, his voice dropping low. "Mate, can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, dipping a prawn in garlic butter. "How much have you given her?" I stopped chewing. "What?" "Analiza. How much money have you given her since you got married?" I laughed it off, uncomfortable. "I'm just taking care of my wife, Malcolm. That's what husbands do." He didn't laugh back. He set down his beer and looked at me seriously. "Lester, I'm not trying to be a prick, but I've seen this a dozen times. Guys come here, fall in love, think it's different, think their girl is special, and maybe sometimes they are, but most of the time." He trailed off, shaking his head. Cherry touched his arm gently, but he kept going. "Just keep your accounts separate. Whatever you do, don't give her access to everything. Trust me on this." I felt defensive, angry even. "Analiza's not like that, Malcolm. Our love is real. She's not using me." Malcolm shrugged. "I hope you're right, mate. I really do. But just be smart about it." Cherry spoke quietly, her voice gentle. "Lester, he's not trying to hurt you. He just cares. We both do." "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "But we're fine, really." Malcolm told a story then, about another British guy he knew, Dave, who'd married a local girl a few years back, gave her access to all his accounts, let her handle everything. 6 months later, she cleaned him out and disappeared, took everything, the house, the car, his entire pension. "Dave's back in Leeds now," Malcolm said, his voice flat. Broken, living with his sister." I listened, but I kept telling myself it was different, that Malcolm didn't understand, that what Analiza and I had was real, that I wasn't Dave, that she wasn't like that girl. Driving home that night, Malcolm's words echoed in my head. I pulled over into a 7-Eleven parking lot and checked my bank account on my phone. Still healthy, over 1,000,000 pesos in savings, still safe. I exhaled, relieved. "See?" I said to myself out loud. Different, but I couldn't shake the feeling, the doubt, the tiny voice asking, what if he's right? I pushed it down, buried it, went home and kissed Analiza like nothing was wrong. But something had shifted, something I couldn't ignore anymore. Analiza asked me to open a joint bank account about a month after Malcolm's warning. We were having breakfast on the balcony when she brought it up. The morning sun was warm, and she was eating mango slices, looking relaxed. "Lester, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "I was thinking, since we're married now, maybe we should have a joint account, for household things, bills, groceries. It would make everything easier." She said it so casually, so reasonably, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I set down my coffee, my stomach tightening slightly. "A joint account?" "Yeah, we're partners, right? Husband and wife. We should share everything." She reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes soft. "I trust you completely, Lester. I want you to trust me too." It made sense. We were married. Sharing finances was normal. Couples did it all the time. But I heard Malcolm's voice in my head. "Keep your accounts separate." I pushed it away. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." Her face lit up. She came around the table and kissed me, long and grateful. "Thank you for trusting me." We went to the bank the next day, BDO, in Ayala. The process took about an hour: paperwork, signatures, ID verification. When it was done, I transferred 1.2 million pesos into the joint account. It was a significant amount, more than half my savings. But I kept about 800,000 inches my personal account, just in case. Though even thinking, just in case, made me feel guilty, like I didn't really trust her. She kissed me outside the bank, in the parking lot under the hot sun. "I love you so much," she said. "I love you too." For a while, everything felt normal. We went shopping together at the malls, had dinners at nice restaurants, visited Tita Baby on weekends. I checked the joint account occasionally. Small withdrawals here and there, 2,000 for groceries, 5,000 for the electric bill, 10,000 for Tita baby's medicine. Nothing alarming. Nothing that raised red flags. Then one morning, about 2 months after opening the account, I woke up early. Analiza was still asleep. I made coffee and decided to check our finances. Just routine. I logged into the joint account on my laptop. 600,000 pesos. Gone. I stared at the screen, my heart starting to race. I refreshed the page, thinking it was a mistake. Same number. Half the money. Just gone. I checked the transaction history. Withdrawals. Large ones. 200,000 here. 250,000 there. 150,000 somewhere else. All within the past 3 weeks. Analiza, I called out, my voice shaking slightly. She came out of the bedroom, brushing her hair, wearing one of my old t-shirts. Yeah, the account. There's a lot of money missing. She frowned, walking over. What do you mean? 600,000 pesos. It's gone. Where did it go? She sighed, like I was being difficult, like I was overreacting. I told you, Lester, my brother needed surgery. It was an emergency. I blinked, my mind spinning. You told me? Yes, last week. Don't you remember? He had a motorcycle accident. They had to operate immediately. The hospital needed payment up front. I stared at her. I didn't remember. I would have remembered that. Your brother had surgery? Yes, Lester. Her voice had an edge now, defensive, hurt. He almost died. Don't you trust me? The ground felt like it was shifting under me. Of course I trust you. I don't remember you telling me. She softened slightly, came over and put her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I should have reminded you. It's been so stressful. I thought I told you. Maybe I only told Tita. Is your brother okay now? He's recovering. It'll take time, but he's alive, thanks to you. She hugged me, and I held her, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I didn't remember any of it. Not the conversation, not the emergency, nothing. But I didn't want to fight, didn't want to accuse her of lying, so I said nothing. I just held her and told myself I must have forgotten, that maybe she did tell me and I wasn't paying attention. The silence swallowed my doubt. But the doubt didn't go away. I woke up one morning in late November, and Analiza wasn't in bed. I reached over, cold sheets. I sat up, groggy, my head thick from not sleeping well. Analiza, I called out. Nothing. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. No messages. No missed calls. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. A knot formed in my stomach. Maybe she went to see Tita baby. Maybe she had an errand. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. I went to the kitchen and made coffee with shaking hands, trying to calm down, trying to tell myself everything was fine. Then I remembered. The account. I opened my laptop on the dining table and logged into the joint account. The page loaded slowly. My heart was pounding. And then I saw it. 0. The screen showed 0. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. I refreshed the page. 0. Refreshed again. 0. Every single peso. Gone. My hand started shaking so badly I could barely hold the mouse. I grabbed my phone and called the bank. This is Lester Whitman. Account number 74923. I need to speak to someone immediately. Now. They transferred me to Mr. Santos, the branch manager. I'd met him once when we opened the account. Mr. Whitman, good morning. How can I help you? My account. It's empty. All the money's gone. Someone emptied it. There was a pause. I heard typing. It felt like forever. Sir, yes. The account was emptied yesterday afternoon. 2 large transfers were made. One to Cebu Prime Properties for 850,000 pesos. One to a private account for 350,000 pesos. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Can you reverse it? Can you stop it? I'm sorry, sir. The account was joint. Both account holders have full access. The transactions were legal. Legal? She took everything without telling me. That's not legal. I understand your frustration, Mr. Whitman. But from a banking perspective, both parties on a joint account have equal authority. She had every right to withdraw the funds. I felt like I was falling, like the ground had disappeared beneath me. So there's nothing I can do? You can file a police report for possible fraud, but I must be honest with you, sir. These cases are very difficult to prosecute, especially when the account holder is legally authorized. I hung up, sat there staring at the screen, staring at zero. My phone buzzed. A message from Malcolm. You okay, mate? Haven't heard from you in a while. I didn't reply. I couldn't form words. I just sat there, feeling my whole world collapsing. Finally, I moved. Got in my car, drove to Tita Baby's house. I don't remember the drive. I was on autopilot, numb. When I got there, the gate was locked. I banged on it. Tita Baby, Analiza. No answer. I banged again, harder. A neighbor peeked over the fence, an older woman in a faded duster. They're not here, she said in broken English. Where are they? She shrugged. Gone, 2 days, maybe 3. I don't see them. Do you know where they went? No, sorry. My chest felt like it was caving in. I got back in my car and tried calling Analiza again. Voicemail. I called 10 more times in a row. Nothing. I sat there in my car outside Tita Baby's house, hands gripping the steering wheel, unable to move, unable to think. A security guard from a nearby house knocked on my window. Sir, are you okay? You need help? I nodded mechanically. I'm fine, but I wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. Everything was gone. Malcolm helped me hire a lawyer, Attorney Villanueva. We met in his cramped office in downtown Cebu City 2 days after the account was emptied. The office was on the 3rd floor of an old building, stacks of folders lining the walls, a single oscillating fan doing nothing against the heat. I sat across from him at a scratched wooden desk and explained everything. The joint account, the missing money, Analiza's disappearance. My voice kept breaking. He took notes, his face expressionless, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with tired, sympathetic eyes. The kind of eyes that have seen this story 100 times. Mr. Lester, I'm very sorry for what you're going through, but I need to be honest with you. Legally, you have very little recourse. What do you mean? The account was joint. She didn't steal from you. She withdrew funds from an account she was legally authorized to access. In the eyes of the law, she did nothing wrong. I leaned forward, my voice rising. But she lied. She manipulated me. She took everything without telling me. He nodded slowly, carefully. Morally, yes. Ethically, absolutely. But legally, no. The law sees this as a domestic dispute, not a criminal act. I felt my throat tighten. So there's nothing I can do? She just gets to walk away with everything? He hesitated, then slid a manila folder across the desk. There's something else you should know. Something I discovered when I looked into her recent activities. I opened the folder. Property records. Official documents from the Registry of Deeds. My eyes scanned the page, trying to make sense of it. Purchase agreement. Mandaue City. Unit 7B. Cebu Peak Residences. 850,000 pesos. Cash payment. The buyer's name, Analiza Lester. I don't understand, I said, my voice hollow. He slid another document across. This is the title registration. I looked down. 2 names listed as co-owners, Analiza Lester and Ronaldo de Leon. My stomach dropped. The room spun. Who is Ronaldo de Leon? Attorney Villanueva's expression was almost pitying. We believe he's her boyfriend. Long-term partner. They've been together for at least 5 years, possibly longer. She never left him, Mr. Lester. She used your marriage, your money, to purchase property for them, for their future together. I stared at the paper, at the name typed in neat black letters, Ronaldo de Leon, the ghost I'd asked about, the nobody she'd laughed off, the late-night phone calls, the hotel in Mandaue. It all made sense now. Horrible, crushing sense. She didn't disappear. I said quietly. No, sir, she just went home. I sat there for a long time, staring at the documents, at the truth laid out in black and white. Official stamps, signatures, dates, all of it real, all of it planned. Can I sue her? I asked finally. Attorney Villanueva sighed. You can try. You can file a case for fraud, for misrepresentation. But I'll be honest with you, Mr. Lester. These cases are extremely difficult to win. The laws in the Philippines favor the local spouse in situations like this. You'd need to prove she never intended to honor the marriage, which is nearly impossible. It would take years, cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and even then, the chances of recovering your money are very, very small. So that's it? My voice cracked. She just wins? He looked at me with genuine compassion. Many expats face this. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. I stood up on shaky legs, shook his hand, paid his consultation fee, walked out into the blinding Cebu sun, and I felt nothing, just hollow, completely, utterly hollow. I texted her one last time. I sat on my balcony that evening with a glass of whiskey, watching the city lights flicker on as the sun went down. My fingers hovered over the screen for a long time before I typed. I know about the condo. I know about Ronaldo. Just tell me why. I hit send and set the phone face down on the table. I didn't expect a reply. I just needed to ask, needed to hear it from her. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but I picked it up. A message from Analiza. I'm sorry, Lester. I never meant to hurt you, but I needed to survive. You were kind, but Ronaldo is my life. I read it twice, 3 times, 4 times. That was it. 13 words. No explanation. No remorse. Just honesty. Cold, brutal, unvarnished honesty. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream. To throw the phone off the balcony. To demand more. To ask how she could do this. To beg for an explanation that made sense. But all I felt was empty. Completely empty. I stared at those 13 words until they blurred. Then I called Malcolm. He answered on the second ring. Mate, I heard. Cherry told me. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm already in the car. 10 minutes. He showed up with a bottle of Johnny Walker and 2 glasses. We sat on my balcony, and he poured generously. We didn't talk. Not at first. We just sat there, looking out at the city, at the life moving below us, indifferent to my pain, indifferent to everything. Finally, Malcolm spoke, his voice quiet. I'm sorry, Lester. I nodded. I know. You're not the first. You won't be the last. I know that too. We drank in silence. The whiskey burned going down, but I welcomed it. Needed it. Somewhere in that silence, I realized something. I'd become a statistic, a cautionary tale, another expat who fell in love with the wrong person, another man who gave everything to someone who gave nothing back, another story Malcolm would tell the next guy who didn't want to listen. Malcolm stayed until past midnight. When he finally left, I sat alone with her message still glowing on my screen. I read it one last time. You were kind, but Ronaldo is my life. Then I deleted it. Blocked her number. It was a small act, meaningless in the grand scheme, but it felt like something, like taking back a tiny piece of control, like closing a door that needed to be closed, and in that moment, it was enough. I sold my condo in Cebu 2 months later, moved to a smaller place in Dumaguete on the southern coast of Negros. Quieter, simpler, cheaper, the kind of place where life moves at half speed, where expats like me can fade into the background and try to rebuild in peace. The condo I got was basic, 1 bedroom, small balcony, but it was mine, and it was enough. I don't talk to women the way I used to. I don't hand out my heart like spare change. I don't trust easily. Maybe I never will again. Malcolm checks in on me once a week. Sometimes he makes the 2-hour drive down with Cherry. We meet for coffee at a place on the boulevard. We talk about safe things, football, the weather, politics back home. anything but her. He never says I told you so, and I love him for that. My daughter called me from Manchester about a month after I moved. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 months. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Dad? Her voice was soft, careful, like she was talking to someone fragile. Hi, sweetheart. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, choosing her words carefully. I heard what happened. Malcolm got in touch with me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I closed my eyes. Thank you. Are you okay? I'm getting there. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm glad you're okay, Dad. I was really worried. She didn't say I told you so. She didn't lecture me. She didn't make me feel small. She just said she was worried and that she was glad I was okay. We talked for an hour about nothing important, about her kids, about her job, about the weather in Manchester. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a small connection to my old life, to the person I used to be. I love you, Dad, she said before hanging up. I love you too, sweetheart. Some days are harder than others. I see couples on the beach in Dumaguete, walking hand in hand, laughing, and I wonder if they're real, if their love is real, if anyone's is. I wonder if the woman is counting down the days until she can leave, if the man is blind to signs he doesn't want to see. But I'm not bitter. Not really. I'm just awake now. Awake in a way I wasn't before. I see things I didn't see before. I ask questions I should have asked. I protect myself in ways I should have from the beginning. I gave Analiza everything I had, my money, my trust, my heart, and she took it all, every last bit. But in a strange way, she gave me something too, even if she didn't mean to. She taught me that I was still capable of feeling, of hoping, of loving. Even if it was based on lies, the feeling itself was real. The hope was real. The love, at least from my side, was real. And maybe that has to be enough. Maybe that's all any of us get. The chance to feel, even if feeling leads to pain. I sit on my small balcony in Dumaguete sometimes in the early morning, watching the sun rise over the water, and I think about Manchester, about Margaret, about the life I left behind, the life I thought I could escape, and I realize I'm not the same man who came to the Philippines looking for peace. I'm someone different now, scarred, wiser, more careful, still learning to trust myself again, still learning to live with the choices I made. I don't regret coming here. I don't even regret meeting Analiza. Not entirely, because without the pain, I wouldn't have learned what I was capable of surviving. I wouldn't have learned how strong I actually am underneath all the loneliness and fear. I wouldn't have learned to rebuild. I close my eyes, breathe in the salt air, listen to the sound of roosters crowing and dogs barking and life continuing on, indifferent to my story. And slowly, gradually, I let it go. All of it. The anger, the shame, the regret, the what-ifs and the should-haves. I let it all drift out with the tide, and for the first time in months, I feel something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from surviving something you didn't think you could survive, from standing up after being knocked down, from learning that you're stronger than you thought. And right now, in this small condo in Dumaguete with the morning sun warming my face, that peace is enough. It has to be enough, because it's all I have left. And I'm learning, slowly, that sometimes that's all you need.